To this day, I regret that I moved to this neighborhood in my hometown. It was a complete nightmare. I was terrified as long as I was living in this neighborhood. You see, when I first heard about this place, it was a gated community. It looked peaceful, safe, and that all the neighbors there pretty much known each other for a long time, and I was very, I was really fell in love with this place. And but I regret to even consider this as the paradise on earth. To this day, I regard this place, this particular gated community, as the psycho neighborhood. You may will get the point why I refer this neighborhood as psycho neighborhood. A brief backstory is really much needed. My name is Rachel. At the time, I was 22 years old, but now I'm 29. You see, I was still living with my parents, and I decided it was time for me to move out from my house, from this my childhood home. And as I had a very much good, well-paid job, I was working at this electronics store. And and since I had a certain budget of what I would go for, I was considering to buy or rent either an apartment or a small house. I was looking through different newspapers and but for most of the ads that I found a house or rent a house or apartment, it was over budget. They were over my budget. But then my mom mentioned that she found an ad for a house that was out for rent in this gated community in my hometown. And my hometown is located in Georgia. Just to be saying that, but exactly where, just I don't want to mention it, saying it for my privacy. But anyways, me and my mom, we called out, we reached out to this real estate agent for this place, and the next day, me and my mom met up with a real estate agent at this gated community. We actually heard about this place, and it has been regarded as safe, zero crime area, a gated community, and it sounded like a peaceful place and like a paradise. So this agent took us to the house, and I immediately fell in love with it. Long story short, I signed for a 1 year lease on this place. So within the next couple of days, my older brother, George, who is at the time was 24, he and my parents and my friend Simon, around the same age as me, helped me to pack a truck and unpack the furniture and the boxes in my house. And after that, um, when I was in my garage, just doing some boxes. I was actually approached by a couple. They said they were my neighbors to the left, and their names are Leonard and Nicole, both are 45. And I was find out that Leonard was actually working at the same real estate uh, agency that I rented the house from. I was surprised, but anyways, they just welcomed me to the neighborhood and start asking. When Nicole asked me where my significant other is, I told her I didn't have any particular significant other, at the moment at least. She was a bit surprised, but asked why. Well, this was a little bit too personal to be asked, but since I wanted to be polite and since they're my new neighbors and I didn't want to get on the wrong hand or wrong foot on this, so I explained that I were in fact in a relationship only a few years earlier with a guy, but he was very abusive, very possessive. He controlled basically all my life, and it took a lot of things to even to end it. She was a little bit surprised at that, but she understood. We small talked for a little bit more, and then they left. And when I came back out to the garage a second time, there was this other couple standing there. An other couple in their 40s. Later turned out they were actually 40 and, well, both 40. And the names were Martin and Clara. They were my neighbors to the right. And they were just basically saying the same thing, like welcome to the neighborhood and ask me for why I'm moving in this place and if I'm gonna live alone, if I had a boyfriend, husband, a fiance or something. When they asked that, I said, no, I am actually single at the moment. Then Martin said that I should probably consider start dating because this community needed some kids, well, for laughter and just since it's a family community. Was a little bit, I was struck badly over this question or this statement, but I told them that I'm actually just had recently just been start moving in, and I just wanted to focus on that first until I start finding to find a boyfriend or something, and they agreed. So once again, they welcome me back, welcome me to the neighborhood, and in a couple of days later, I was actually introduced by another pair couple neighbors across the street. Their names were Betty, 42, Henry, 44. And it turned out her husband was working as a plumber, and he even offered me some help service if I needed it in the future. And I was like, thanks, I pretty much needed that if I would. But honestly, I was really much not not much needed. After all, um, I was being trained to how at least to fix things at the house of my own dad. Just mention it, even though it's not relevant. But anyways, I thanked them and things started to acting pretty much normal for me. I mean, I just moved into a new house and I loved it, and it was just a great place. But you may more like asking if the neighbors are so friendly, and why do I call this psycho neighborhood? Oh boy, I will get to that. But in the beginning, the neighbors was really friendly. But one day, when my friend Simon come by for just to see me, how to see how I was settling in my new house, my next door neighbor Nicole to my left saw this, and after that Simon had left, she asked me if that was my boyfriend. I told her no, that was my my friend, and she then said that I should probably start dating him because he's quite handsome. In fact, even though he's handsome, but Simon is like, I see him like a brother type, not like someone I will actually dating. And I told her that, and she took it almost like offensive. It's like, why don't you give him a chance? I was like, he's my friend, and even if I would, and even if he, okay, even if I would have feelings for him, I don't think he even wants to date me after all. But then I did mention it. There was a reason why I wouldn't date him, because he was already dating someone else. And that then she started believing that I was his side girl or something. And I corrected her. He is my friend. And his girlfriend is aware that he is a friend of mine. And she apologized and left. But that was not the last of it. Because after this, my older brother George came by from time to time to see how I was been doing. And from time when Clara and Betty, my neighbors across the street and to my right, saw this, they started assuming that I was now dating this a few older guy, and they said I was lucky to have this guy to come over to my house from time to time to start dating. And I asked them who. When they described George, I laughed and said, that's not my boyfriend. They started to almost like look mad. You have two different guys over. One is just your friend, and who's this other one? They said. That is George. He's my older brother. In fact, the only ones who actually had met George were actually Nicole and Leonard. But Betty and Clara and Henry and Martin hasn't. And they apologized because when I said it was my brother, they looked shocked. And like I said, they apologized for making this rude comment. Ever since then, I started acting a little bit, started feeling weirded out about this. Because this is not the first time my neighbors started asking me if I was dating someone. Because since I moved in, I was alone. And if when I had George over, they started assuming that he was my boyfriend. When I found out he was my brother. When I had Simon over, same thing. But now I told them that he already had someone, and then like they assumed that and he was cheating with me. But I made a statement, almost put my foot down, and said, "Look, Simon is my friend, not anything else." And it happened one time from time when either Clara or Betty or even Nicole came up to me and asked if I found a boyfriend yet or start dating. They even suggested I should probably date some guy that they know or just a young man, but I was getting a bit annoyed about this. And every time when I take him by, before they say anything, I told them, "Ladies, I'm not one of the dudes start dating, so don't try to ask me about it. I'm not wanting to date right now. I'm not even interested in dating." And for some reason, that starts in a reaction to this. Because one day I received a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't signed by, but strange is, normally when you get a letter, it's either signed by who sent it in a post stamp. But this wasn't even that. It was just in a white envelope with just my name on it. No, my address, anything. So it had been delivered by hand. And since I don't even have any idea of who could have done it. So, I opened it, and it was just a love letter. A simple love letter. Turned out, it was signed Secret Admirer. It was a young guy. He expressed his true feelings for me, and that he welcomed me to the neighborhood, and that he thought I was beautiful, and wanted me to perhaps start seeing him. But I just looked around in my neighborhood and I asked myself, who could this been? I mean, is a young guy? Yes, some of my neighbors actually have a sons around my age, or a little bit older or a few years younger. So, who could it have been? I mean, I didn't want to start accusing any of my neighbors for their sons of being doing this. So I took the letter in, threw it in the trash bin, and just moved on. But these letters kept going on and on and on. And eventually, I had enough, so I got a camera, a secret camera, and I got the neighbor who saw who did it. It was Daniel. Daniel was the son of Nicole and Leonard, my neighbors to the left. And it turned out, when I actually approached him one morning, when he was just out for a walk, I confronted him. And he didn't even deny it. He actually was surprised that I was the one who did it. Actually happy that I found out he was the one. And then he expressed his true feelings for me and asked me out on a date. I was surprised at, but he was actually good looking, and I said yes. I know, stupid, but I did. And we went on a date, just one date. He took me out for dinner, and just during the dinner, he literally asked me to close my eyes, and when I did, he proposed to me. And the thing is, I only talked to him before this date, maybe just only a handful of times, and I barely know anything. And he stood there on his knees proposing to me. All the other people in the restaurant was cheering when I said I was dumbfounded. But I just stood up and said, "Daniel, no, I don't even know you that well. This is our own first date. And I'll be honest, I don't even know you that well enough." So I paid my part of the dinner and left. And while he was still there on the floor, holding the ring out. And the next day, his parents actually walked up to my house, almost like demanding to know what I did. because when their son came home, he was crying his eyes out. I told what happened. My words against his, of course, because it turned out he told them that I was rejecting him because I called him ugly, stupid, not smart enough to be even to consider to be with. His parents took that as offensive, but I told the right story. Like, he told me to close my eyes, and it did, and he literally proposed to me. And both his parents just looked at each other and asked, "What?" Yeah. And then suddenly, before I could say anything else, like Nicole, like, "Oh, this was so romantic." But why did you say no? I told him that I was not even interested in Daniel, and never would. Even though he's a good-looking guy, smart, but he was not my. I wasn't even interested in him. And in fact, you don't even propose to someone just after one date. That's not common things to do. And if we had been dating for a couple of months, perhaps even a year, then I would have considered to being saying yes if I had feelings for him. But I barely know him. We only had talked for a handful of times. And his mother started being taken as offensive. Like, so you really don't like my son. You should give him a chance. I told them both, no, I'm not interested, so please tell your son I'm not wanting to be dating him, and if he want to do that, I will not be say yes anymore to him. So I closed the door and left. Inside, of course. And that was it. I didn't see much of their son anymore. When I did see him, he started crying and just ran home. And then his parents started accusing me for breaking his heart every time when they saw him coming home, telling them that I called them some of the most meanest words that he can think of. When they confronted me outside, I told them that I didn't. I never did. In fact, I could prove it. I had a camera of my house. But that was one thing that they told me wasn't allowed. What? You're not allowed to have cameras at your own house? To as a security? They both said no. And in fact, I even got a letter from the supposed community's president told me I'd either have to be paying a series of fines or had the camera removed or being evicted. So I did what I only could do. I removed the cameras. So I told him the camera was gone, and of course I thought this could stop from that. But no. In fact, one day when I came home from work, I saw that someone actually been in my house. Someone had been looking around in my drawers and in the kitchen and even stole a few things from me. I wonder who could have done this. And it says I had no cameras, I couldn't see who could have been. And I asked for some of the neighbors, but they said they hadn't even seen anything. So, but this became a very much repeating occurrence. It happened over and over. And I later found out who had been doing it. Leonard and Nicole. Since Leonard was a real estate and worked for the same agency, he had the keys, or at least the spare keys, to my house. And since he could just give it a copy to his wife, so she could go to my house, ruining things, stealing things, or just roaming around, I was getting enough of this. I said that I had proof. Like, you couldn't even have cameras outside. When I put some cameras inside, I had recorded. But I did confront both of them. They denied I haven't done it. But I didn't mention the cameras this time. So I told this to Martin, Clara, Betty, and Henry. They took very offensive. Like, how did I dare to accuse Leonard and Nicole? In fact, they also started somehow acting up as well. Because every single morning, I've been hearing someone banging at my front door like 2 a.m., 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, or one times even as 1 in the morning. And I usually go to bed around 12 midnight or just 1 a.m. So, since I don't have cameras outside, and since there was not the same standard hours each single time it happened, but a few times I did notice someone running, in order to ruin my life? Alright. But I realized it was my neighbor Martin and Henry. They have been doing this. And I started having some issues with my plumbings. Like literally plumbing issues. Like the water pressure was not even high enough and suddenly the water started to smell. I was dumbfounded. I looked through my own plumbing and I could have asked Henry for help, but I suspicious that he had done something to this. So I called my dad, who was former retired plumber. So I asked him, and he confirmed someone actually tampered with my pipes. And I couldn't have done anything. But then I realized the cameras. But since this was actually from most of the pipes has been tampered from the outside, and when it happened, I didn't even had any cameras in the kitchen. So that was one slight problem. But anyways, despite happiness, this occurrence did keep happening over and over, and I had enough. So one day I confronted Leonard, Nicole, Martin, Clara, Betty, and Henry when they were actually over at Betty and Henry's house. They were all outside just talking when I walked over and said, "Listen, I know all of you are behind to damage my house. My dad was here. He could see that you, Henry, had tampered, and I have footage on all of you." Then it's like they yelling at me, "How dare I to have cameras outside the house?" I said, "Not outside, inside." And I always actually then demanded I delete every single thing that I have recorded because they were invading their privacy. How they're invading their privacy when they recorded it from my own house? And I was dumbfounded. And after I confronted them, things only escalated. One morning I found my car tires slashed, and since I had no cameras to prove it was actually none of my neighbors, I was nothing I could done. And it only get worse. Someone actually started to scratch my car and all that. It just only escalated from worse. That is why I said neighbor of psychos. So I reached out to my agency, the real estate agencies, asked them if it was possible to end my lease earlier. They said I do have the option, but I had to pay a lot more money for that. Even when I was given the option that I could end my lease earlier, but I had to spend some more money on it, and knowing that some people may have had a little bit hard time to do that, but I only had like two options. Either pay some extra money in order to end my lease to move out from this psycho neighborhood, or live the rest of my lease out the rest of the year and still being harassed by my neighbors all the time. And I had no idea if I could afford it. My parents hasn't been informed of this constant harassment that had been going on. And not only that, when I had over Simon over, or if I had my brother and Simon over, or if I had some of my friends, one time when I actually had a few friends over just to have for 4th of July, my neighbors, all of them, like Leonard, Nicole, Martin, Clara, Betty, and Henry, all of them called the police for noise complaint. And I was like, what? And we weren't even doing any fireworks at all. We were just watching fireworks or even watched a movie. But right if my friends have been having this to happen, so my friends chose to leave rather being escorted by the police himself. And when I asked my neighbors what they had in mind to do this, but they just laughed and said, "We never complained, but I know it was either one of them or all of them together." And when I asked my friends if they come over, at least two of my friends did. And it happened again. And this time I confronted all of them and said, I know you're the ones that complained to the police. We wouldn't even do anything. We're just having dinner. But they accused me from lying to the police. So I had enough. So after I had talked to my agent, real estate agency about this, I didn't afford to leave of my own. So I called out to my parents. Like I said, they were not aware of the harassment my neighbors had been doing. My dad, he could easily have been beating Henry, Martin, and Leonard easily. He was like 6'8" tall. And he was built like a tank, almost. But he's a big teddy bear. I called my parents, and my dad answered. And I told him that I have a problem. And he asked me what kind of problem. So I told him everything. Like everything what my neighbors have been doing since I moved in. Including what their neighbor's son tried to do. That made him laugh, but when I told him what my neighbors had been trying to do, and even had been in my house, that made him furious. And it's like, I will be over shortly. And he hung up. And I went outside in front of my house. Betty and Clara walked up to me and stand in my front yard and started telling me to stay away from their husbands. Because according to their mind, or at least what they believed, I had been trying to seduce and flirt with their husbands so I could sleep with them. I was dumbfounded. I was laughing. I was like, they're away. They're twice as my age. And why would I even want to sleep with any of them? That made them furious. How dare I to do this? How to disrespect their husbands? They're pillars of the community. Literally what they said, not my words. But they then started to accuse me for seducing their husbands once again. And they didn't know this. A car parked right outside my house, and my dad stepped out. And he heard them saying that. And he's like, with his booming voice, like, how dare you talk to my daughter like that? They jumped up and said that they didn't say anything like it. But he said, it's no use to excuse myself to this. And he told them to leave my property and leave me alone and not harass me anymore. But they just told me that this is not over. But he said, oh, it will, if the police find out about this. But then somebody laughed and said the police wouldn't even do anything because they said, we are above the law. You are lowlifes. We will do anything we want to do. We can never be harassed or arrested. They laughed and just walked off. My dad hugged me and he told me that he was sorry. If I had told him about this earlier, we could have done something about it. I told him I had enough and I want to move out. I called I called the real estate agency and they said I had the option that I could move out, but I would have to spend a lot more money on doing the process to end my lease earlier. Since I had signed the lease for 1 year, I mean, I'd rather move out now and rather been staying here for the rest of the year being constant harassment, because who knows what else they would have in mind, or if they were to escalate all of this. And my dad told me that he will take care of that. And I told him more when we went inside that my neighbors, Leonard, had been inside my house with a copy of my key, and I mentioned that he worked for the same agency. And in fact, I had proof. I told him that I had a copy of this recording and I gave it to Simon as safekeeping. And but I had another copy in my house, which unfortunately they have found and destroyed. But my dad believed my single word because he could see and somehow sense that I was terrified. I was not the type of person to just lie about this. And in fact, he used to witness two of my neighbors' wives accusing me for trying to sleep with their husbands. So my dad called the agency and informed them that he would be able to pay off to this so I could end my lease earlier. And long story process on that is they did. They ended my lease and I was able to move out. The last day when I was moving out, I literally saw all my neighbors just outside my house and said, they didn't say anything. I was just like, I just want to do something. So I walked up to them, despite my dad not said not to do it, because it's hard to say what they would say. But I said, I'm glad I'm moving out, so I won't have to be harassed by you, psycho neighbors. But that didn't faze them. They just laughed and said, us, psychos? The only psycho here is you, said Leonard. Oh yeah, about that, Leonard. Be happy that you at least have a home or something, but perhaps not for long. Without what evidence. I didn't say it even more like that. I was like, who knows? Bye. So I left. And that is not all of it, though. Shortly afterwards, things happened. I literally went over to Simon's apartment. I got the copy and I made another copy just in case. So I went to the police and I presented them all the information I had. And they were stunned on this. Because it's clearly that even despite I told them that I never gave Leonard or any of my neighbors of a copy to my house. The only ones who had a copy was my parents and my brother. Only those three anchored at the agency. So I filed a file of report for harassment and breaking. But technically, since I no longer live there anymore, so there was much I can't know about that. But since it was clearly that it was Leonard actually and all of his other neighbors have broken in and clearly stole some of my items. But honestly, I didn't care about what they took. But it was just only small. They took some jewelry which I could easily replace. It wasn't even that expensive. It was something I bought myself. And some like that, other smaller things. And I report this, I did send this statement to the real estate agency, telling them about one of their employees, Leonard, what he has been doing, and that I have filed report to the police about his harassment and what he's breaking. They at first didn't believe me, because Leonard had been working for so many years and was one of the most trustworthy agents, their employees. But when I presented the information, including a copy of the recordings of him working into my house, they were horrified. They couldn't even believe it. But this new evidence, there was nothing that they couldn't even not do the question about it. So, they fired Leonard. You may think this is the end of all the stories? Who knows? It's a little bit more than that. But it's happy to say that when Leonard found out that he was fired, he somehow had my number even when I was still living there. He called me to accuse me to have he terminated from his job, and that I immediately filed false accusations. I told him I still had the recordings and as a copy of it, and the agency had it and the police had seen it. It was clearly a sign that he was doing it. And he started once again to accuse me for just framing him. But how would I frame him with someone that looks like much identical to him? And not only that, the later turned out Martin and Henry also got arrested for burglary. And they were sentenced to at least 6 months in jail. But ever since that happened, I was told that all of them, including their wives, had to move out from their community. And that was the last I ever heard of them. And to be honest, I don't even care what happened to them. This were only brought to themselves. And even after that, and from what I heard afterwards, the neighborhood was no longer as close, was not the same afterwards. It was the new president of the community and new rules, and Yeah. And I did actually telling people online and to all my friends and neighbors and all that to spread how to spread, even though all that was actually covered in news media like newspapers, local news, all that. I actually told everyone that I know about this, and even on social media, to that this place was not where you want to live. Because if that happened once, who knows what happened again. So that is the reasons why I prefer this neighborhood as Psycho neighborhood. Ever since then, it has been had tried to rebuild its reputation as a safe and welcome community. And if I were offered to be returned to move back there, no, absolutely not. And if I tell people to want to live there, that would be up to them. Once again, I not want to live in this neighborhood, and my former neighbors from Psycho neighborhood stay away from me.